this poster is about another aspect of irrigation that we study less usually, and that has to do with how irrigation buffers agriculture from shocks, in terms of from climatic shocks, from rainfall shocks. So one of the benefits of irrigation is that during a dry year, when there is not enough rainfall, irrigation is supposed to provide access to a more reliable source of water. And here we try to look at that, how well that has worked in India. India is a country where the variability of rainfall, the monsoon rainfall from year to year is very high, and there's always been like kind of a real heavy burden on India's agriculture and more generally its entire economy. So one of the boons of irrigation is supposed to be to be able to buffer those shocks. So when there is a good year, irrigation is supposed to, you can store that water, whether it's in the surface, in a big dam, or in groundwater, and then you can use that water when there is a dry year. That should enable you to kind of protect yourself from that variability, natural variability, just in the same way that if you have access to a bank account, when you have a good year and you make a lot of money, you put some of it in the bank. And then when you have a bad year, you actually can use some of that money, and you can in that way maintain the same consumption, the same income. So that's the same thing irrigation is supposed to do. And here we just try to kind of make a statistical estimate of how well that has worked in India. Now it's not clear how well that works, even though, because the practical realization of that theoretical potential may be compromised by all kinds of inefficiencies, whether they are economical, social, or technical. So what we do basically is we look at different parts of India and we say how much, we do simple statistical methods to study how much does, in a given place in India, does the agricultural production depend on the rainfall in that year. If the dependency is high, then it's not good, that agricultural production and the whole rural economy will fluctuate a lot from year to year. So hopefully irrigation is supposed to reduce that dependency. And we do see indeed from statistical analysis that the more irrigation there is in a given area, in a given district, the less the dependency on the rain is in that district. But we qualify it in some ways. First of all, we differentiate between different types of irrigation, and we see that both groundwater irrigation and irrigation from large dams has been effective, but irrigation from more small localized storages like local tanks, more traditional, is not so effective in buffering from this interannual rainfall shocks. And that's intuitive because these have like a smaller storage potential. We also make the point that the effectiveness of groundwater irrigation and buffering depends on what kind of geology there is under that particular location. And we see that like the more irrigation you have, the more wells you have in an area. If those aquifers are alluvial and deep, then there is a more consistent trend downwards. But areas where, in much of India, the geology is actually more hard rock and the aquifers are more shallow, in those kind of areas there is less pronounced relationship, especially as we keep expanding the irrigation. So these are just kind of some preliminary findings in that regard. That this is ongoing research, we're still trying to refine it.